Thank you very much, Madam President. Honourable members, I've said many times when I've been in this House that I believe that human rights should be the silver thread that runs through all the statements and actions of the European Union. I believe over the last 12 months, thanks in no small part to Stavros Lambrinidis, who's sitting beside me, and the External Action Service team led by Mara Marinaki, that we've made significant reform in our approach, our initiatives and our actions on human rights. Last year, we adopted our strategic framework and action plan on human rights and democracy, agreed unanimously by Member States and supported by this Parliament through its high-level human rights contact group. Today, we have a human rights focal point officer in every EU delegation, as well as a Brussels-based working group in the Council. We have fully developed human rights country strategies and a much stronger annual report, which allows Parliament and civil society to measure our performance against our commitments. The substantial restructuring of the report makes it a much more effective tool for our ongoing work, and specifically, it responds to the request of the Parliament by following the structure of the action plan and highlighting concrete achievements and challenges. The report also demonstrates the steps we've taken to increase our interinstitutional cooperation, our policy coherence, our visibility, our effectiveness across our work. I believe we've made significant progress in these areas. I want to highlight a few things. First of all, the appointment of an EU Special Representative for Human Rights. The first. Under your guidance and my mandate, I want to pay tribute to his energy, his commitment and his determination. He's worked with over 100 ministers and ambassadors across the world, worked closely with you and with teams on the ground to raise the profile of human rights, and worked closely with civil society in Europe and in other countries, and helped to secure really important changes. The protection of NGOs and human rights defenders is a core priority, I know, for both Stavros and for me. And he's actively engaged with over 150 international and local NGOs from 30 countries to safeguard their space to function freely and to promote our support. I want to thank him most warmly and look forward to many, many more achievements in the future. But Stavros knows better than anyone that the support that we give is not just financial, but also political, legal and diplomatic. And in that regard, I want to underline how tremendously important the Parliament's Sakharov Prize is. There's no question that 2012 was a challenging year for civil society in so many countries. There's a worrying trend that parliamentarians here have spotted to limit the space through legislation, through court action and restrictions of civil society, particularly with regard to foreign funding. I believe that safeguarding the work of civil society is fundamental to the work of the European Union. I believe that safeguarding freedom of association and peaceful assembly has to stay at the top of our agenda. I've expressed my concerns in statements, of course, but also in person, and I will continue to do so. And with the support and help of Stavros and the work of our delegations, we will continue to try and ensure civil society is given the space it needs, and that governments, old, new, transitional or permanent, understand that this is fundamental to the perception of them and fundamental to the kind of society they wish to create. Honourable members, NGOs and civil society make governments and politicians uncomfortable. Exactly. It's what they're supposed to do, to push the boundaries, to watch the way governments work and to get under their skin. In 2012, we saw too the great difficulty faced by many who seek to practice their faith and to have the freedom of their belief or none. We make it clear this is an inalienable human right and an essential pillar of society. It's an integral part of our political dialogue with third countries. I've spoken out to condemn religious intolerance and discrimination, whether in Egypt, Nigeria, Iran, Iraq, Libya, Mali, Pakistan, Tunisia and elsewhere. But be under no doubt that our aim in speaking is to achieve results. We know, for example, that the statements made in Tripoli contributed to the release of Egyptian Christians held in Libya. The importance of this issue is why we wanted our new guidelines and why we've consulted widely to make sure they have a strong and clear content. I'm extremely grateful again to the Human Rights Committee of the Parliament for your valuable input. I want to very much welcome too the Adrikiana report. I trust that many of the recommendations will be reflected in the final version of the guidelines, which will be adopted by the Foreign Affairs Council this month on the 24th of June. I've also been extremely worried about the discrimination in some countries based on sexual orientation or gender identity. As you know, we've contributed to the multilateral efforts, especially in the UN, as well as at regional and bilateral level. We have here too developed practical EU guidelines to be adopted this month by the Council, which should reinforce the work of the European Union. We've raised our deep concerns with Uganda and Cameroon about proposed parliamentary bills further criminalising homosexuality. In Malawi, we've spoken out against the prison sentences on gay couples and against recent events in Nigeria. We use our regular dialogues to raise this discrimination and to promote tolerance, supporting campaigns in Russia, in Croatia, in Turkey, Montenegro and Brazil to support local and international NGOs in campaigns against discrimination. I thank this House for your input. If I may single out Michael Cashman, I would do so for his tireless efforts. When we look at our changing world, I also continue to be concerned about what's happening to women and girls. Honourable members in this House know that no society can function well, no economy do as well as it should, without the input of the rich talent and ability of half of its population, women and girls. I was really pleased that we saw the successful adoption of conclusions at the recent 57th session of the UN Commission on the Status of Women. But let me say to honourable members, this was not easy. Some countries tried to water down the unconditional condemnation of violence against women through appeals to domestic traditions, laws and cultures. It was the tireless work of our EU delegations that was largely responsible for the defeat of those attempts. We are united in our belief that there are no acceptable circumstances for violence against women. No place where the failure to allow girls to be educated is acceptable. No society that can hold its head up where women are forced to keep their heads down. So we continue our strong engagement in the implementation of Security Council Resolution 1325, with support of €200 million a year for the development and implementation of national action plans, funding for NGOs and training. And we strengthened our commitment further with a Memorandum of Understanding with UN Women that forms the basis of a partnership to help us make progress in our international commitments. I am so grateful for the Parliament's strong support in this area. I must mention too the focus on freedom of the press and media in the report of Madam Schaake and welcome it very, very much. The increased violence against journalists, restrictions on press freedom in many countries, including our neighbours, must be challenged. We condemn attacks on journalists and bloggers and are developing our own guidelines to use in our work in delegations and in our teams in Brussels. The Commission is already implementing a pilot project mandated by the European Parliament on a European Centre for Press and Media Freedom. The territorial scope will now cover the EU 27, Croatia and candidate countries. Honourable members, we continue too with our campaign against the death penalty. I congratulate all those involved in the extensive lobbying which played a pivotal role in the success of the UN General Assembly 67 resolution. It was adopted with an unprecedented 111 votes in favour and a record 91 sponsors, and we should rightly take some of the credit for that. Our revised guidelines further refine all aspects of our policy and pull together all of our available diplomatic action. During 2012 and the first part of this year, I have issued 54 statements on the death penalty, on breaches of existing moratoriums in India, Pakistan, Indonesia, Taiwan, Japan and the Gambia, on persistent executions in Iran, in Saudi Arabia and China, as well as on violations of minimum standards in the United States, Malaysia and Singapore. During the same period, I instructed our delegations to carry out 30 démarches, reiterating our position and calling on authorities to refrain from executions. And we will continue to push and press for universal abolition. Honourable Members, new challenges and existing challenges, supporting countries going through transitions, helping them not to choose to restrict human rights, but to see it was for those rights that people fought and that some tragically died. Working with countries who describe themselves as developing so that they develop the right approach to human rights. Most of all, to remind all that for human rights to apply to you, there is only one criteria, which is to be human.